Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to my complete Boothill guide. Boothill is the newest 5-star hunt carry who focuses on breaking enemies fast and dealing a lot of break damage. Boothill is a one-of-a-kind unique character that I find very fun and also strong, so we're going to cover everything you need to know about Boothill, covering his best relics, light cones, teams, playstyle, and much more in one video. Before we begin, I want you guys to know a few things. First of all, this video was recorded on the creator experience server, which is why I get to bring it to you guys early, or somewhat early. And also, I recorded most of this video while away from home, so excuse the different mic quality as I did the best I could. Before we begin, I want you guys to know that I do stream most nights on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested. With that being said, let's talk about Boothill. Alright, so starting things off, what does Boothill actually do? First of all, for your skill, Boothill will force an enemy into a standoff state where you will challenge a specific enemy, they will become taunted, and both you and said enemy will take up to 30% more damage, and Boothill himself will take 15% more. This state lasts for 2 turns, and during which your basic attacks will be enhanced and you won't be able to use your skill anymore. Once you use your skill, your turn will not end. Similarly to Blade, it will just enhance your basic attacks and you get to go again. And once you defeat the target that you're fighting or you break their weakness, Boothill will gain a stack of pocket trickshot and will dispel the standoff. Now, to cover what this actually means, first of all, your enhanced basic attack will just be a stronger version of your normal one and will not recover any skill points. And this enhanced basic attack can only target the enemy inside of the standoff. I also want to mention that since the standoff ends as soon as you weakness break an enemy or defeat an enemy, you will have to use your skill again on either a different target if you defeated the previous one, or even the same one if you just weakness broke them, to actually have access to your enhanced basics again, which will deal more damage than your regular basics. Additionally, Boothill's passive talent 5 peas in a pod also incentivizes you to use your enhanced basics and gives you a lot of bonuses. First of all, your enhanced basic attacks will deal increased toughness damage based on how many stacks you have. You can have up to 3 stacks, and each stack will give you 50% more toughness reduction, so toughness damage, allowing you to break future targets much easier. Additionally, if the target that you're attacking is already weakness broken, your enhanced basic attacks will deal an additional instance of damage based on your pocket trickshot stacks. This damage will be break damage that will scale based on your Boothill's physical break damage. Because of this, your break effect will be very important on a character like Boothill, as a lot of your damage will come from breaking enemies and then this additional break damage that you get from your enhanced basics. Other things about this talent are that once you win a battle, you can actually retain your pocket trickshot stacks for the next battle, which is great for more break and more damage. And also, the max toughness taken into account for this bonus break damage that you're doing can't exceed 16 times the base toughness reduction of your normal basic attack, which is 480 toughness. Not something you really need to care about, but just know that there's a cap for enemies that have really high toughness, basically just Sam or future enemies. What is worth pointing out though is that in general, since Boothill is a character who will be doing primarily break damage, not just from breaking the enemies, but also through his talent, right? Dealing a bonus instance of break damage. Understanding how break damage works and what the formula is pretty important, so let me break it down for you. The exact formula for break damage is on screen now, but all you need to know is that for the most part, you will be building break effect to maximize your break damage, and it also will scale based on the toughness of the enemies you're fighting, meaning that if you're fighting elites, bosses, or enemies with higher toughness versus just random weak mobs, you will be doing more damage when you are breaking. Scaling with vulnerability debuffs, defense shred, and resistance shred as well, but not sort of standard DPS stats like crit, which while it will increase other parts of your kit, other sources of damage from Boothill, it will not increase your break damage because obviously break damage can't crit. And regarding super break, the formula is different as you can see, but for the most part, you are still playing and building Boothill the same way. It's just a mechanic that acts a little bit differently, and that will happen when you're running Boothill alongside Harmony MC, but more on that in the team section later. Moving on, Boothill's ultimate is an ability that will deal damage to a single target and implant physical weakness to them. This is a guaranteed implant that will last for 2 turns, on top of dealing a pretty decent amount of single target damage and delaying the target's action. This ultimate is very important to implant a physical weakness on the enemy. Even though the damage is nothing crazy, being able to break the enemy's toughness if they're not already weak to physical is definitely a huge deal, given how much of Boothill's kit scales on him breaking enemies and dealing break damage. For Boothill's passives, first of all, he will increase his crit rate by 10 and 50% respectively of his break effect, up to a maximum of 30% crit rate and 150% crit damage if he has 300 break effect. This is a really nice passive trace that incentivizes you to build as much break effect as you can, not just to increase your break damage, but also to get more crit rate and crit damage. Additionally, while Boothill takes more damage to the enemy inside of the standoff, he will take less damage, 30% less, from the enemies that aren't in the standoff, which can help him survive a bit easier. Lastly, for his third passive, when Boothill is in standoff and regenerates pocket trickshot, he will will gain 10 energy, triggering even if he's gaining a pocket trick shot stack past the limit of 3, allowing him to get his ultimate back easier when he breaks or defeats an enemy. Additionally, for Boothill's technique, he will actually implant a physical weakness when using his skill for the first time in the battle, effectively mimicking the one that you would get through your ultimate, lasting for 2 turns, allowing you to break the first enemy you choose quite easily by forcefully implanting a physical weakness onto them. For Boothill's minor traces, you get a free 37.3 break effect, just a ton if you unlock them all, on top of some attack and HP as well, which are nice bonuses. For your trace priority, I recommend leveling your talent as your number 1 priority, followed by your skill, ultimate, and lastly your basic, which doesn't matter as much, focusing on leveling your other abilities and also making sure you unlock your major and minor traces. Now, as you can see through Boothill's kit, it's very clear that he's a character, a main DPS designed around break damage. You want to implant a physical weakness to whoever you're fighting, unless they're already physical weak, focus them down, making sure you break this enemy with your Boothill, deal good break damage from the break effect you're stacking, and then use your enhanced basic attacks to deal additional break damage thanks to your talent. Not only can he implant a physical weakness, but he also deals a lot of toughness damage as you stack up his talent and will deal really good break damage because you're not just doing damage from breaking an enemy, you're also dealing more break damage from your enhanced basic attacks to a weakness broken enemy. For all those reasons, on top of his trace giving him crit rate and crit damage for his break effect, you will notice that it's crucial to stack break effect, focus on that on top of some other stats like speed, more so than just building him like a standard DPS and going for things like attack, crit rate, and crit damage, which still are useful, still are nice, but don't contribute to as much of his damage as break effect will. In fact, crit matters so little when compared to break effect and making sure you have good break effect substats that it really shouldn't be your number 1 priority, and I'll put some numbers on screen showing the damage difference from a few different builds, one focusing on maximizing your break effect with HP main stats, and another one with high crit investment and mediocre break effect, and a last one with high break effect with a decent amount of crit as well. And as you can see, the difference between all 3 is really not that big. Now, there are a lot of assumptions here. I'll link the calculations in the description if you want to know more, but for the most part, the main point you need to take away here is that break effect is really what matters, and while crit is nice, not only is it not efficient to build crit over break effect because of your passive trace that gives you more crit just by building break effect anyways, but also the majority of your damage comes from break anyways, so getting extra crit really isn't that big of a deal. It allows low investment builds or even just going based on your substats and not needing the perfect main stat, not needing many stats at all outside of just break effect and also speed, which I'll explain more in the build section, but going more is just good, allows you to get a lot of value out of Boothill without needing the craziest stats or the most investment. He's a one-of-a-kind character that relies on breaking enemies and obviously going as often as possible. The main tips I could give when it comes to playing Boothill is try to break enemies with Boothill to get his break damage and also apply bleed. If you're running another character on really high break effect like Harmony MC, it can be okay if you break on them too, but generally you're trying to break on your Boothill and also managing your skill points efficiently to allow your Boothill to skill whenever he needs to, and then managing your skill points on your support characters who should be more skill point efficient. And so overall, I really like Boothill. While he does have some weaknesses like being primarily single target, he's a character who can break enemies incredibly fast, notably on top of being able to implant physical weakness on enemies, really shining in single target situations as he is a hunt carry, and that's kind of what they're made for. Very strong and also easy to build because as we saw, and as I'll go over again in the stat section, a lot of your main stats really won't matter as long as you're prioritizing break effect and speed. The rest is kind of whatever. This can make him more accessible to build, and he also has some big upgrades like his signature Lycone and certain supports that synergize really well with him. And so overall, I am very pleased with Boothill, but don't feel forced to get him because there's a ton of good DPS options in the game, and also he is primarily good in single target, whereas other characters may be better in AoE. Alright, now with that out of the way, let's talk about how to actually build your Boothill to get the most value out of this character. Well, as we saw, Boothill is a character who is all about breaking enemies and therefore building break effect. Stats that can maximize both his break effect and his speed will therefore be the best for him overall. While there is a chance that we get new break effect sets in the future, for now the choices we have are the following. First of all, Thief of Shooting Meteor is going to be the best overall as it gives you 32% break effect, 16% from the 2-piece and another 16% from the 4-piece, on top of also giving you some energy when you weakness break an enemy. With that in mind, you can also get the same amount of break effect by running the 2-piece of the set with the 2-piece of the Watchmaker, only losing out on a bit of energy. So if your substats are better by pairing these 2-piece sets together, then you can do that instead of going for the 4-piece for a very similar result. Additionally, since speed matters on Boothill as well, because you want to go as fast as you can, get as many turns as possible in, the 2-piece of the Messenger set can also be viable as well, with my recommendation being to choose based on your substats, with the break effect sets being the standard. Additionally, I wanted to mention the 4-piece Quantum set, Genius of Brilliant Stars, as being a potential best in slot option. The reason why this set can be good is because it allows you to ignore 10 to 20% of the enemy's defense on all of your damage. This is good and will affect all of your kit, with the 10% defense ignore being significant, but it being even better and especially strong if the enemy is quantum weak. This can happen either naturally against quantum weak enemies, or if you run Silver Wolf alongside of your Boothill and can implant quantum alongside the physical you're already implanting with Boothill and whatever other weaknesses the enemies start with. Generally though, it's just a good option if you have the substats, but typically I recommend going for a break effect set for most people, or just once again choosing based on your substats wherever you have the most break effect and speed, either going for the 4-piece Thief set or mix and matching the good 2 pieces. For the Planar ornaments you want, typically just go for Talia to give you more break effect, up to 36% total, provided you have 145 speed or more. Because as I mentioned earlier, the main stats you're looking for on Boothill are just break effect and speed, it shouldn't be too hard to get a speed amount of 145, especially when you factor in any buffs you may be getting, like a light cone that can give you speed, or just getting enough from your boots and substats. If you don't have a Talia set, you can use something else, for example Rudolent Arena, for some crit and basic damage, or even Glamith, but as we saw earlier, break effect is typically just more valuable than getting a bit more crit or a bit more damage because of how dependent you are on your break damage and also how well he scales with break effect given his traces. Because of this, I recommend going for Talia as your best in slot overall for 36% break effect. Oh, and before I move on, the obligatory Eagle of Twilight line mention, giving you 25% action advance, not my favorite, but technically getting action advance can be useful if it doesn't mess up your team order, notably if you're playing without Bronya or if she has the set as well. For the most part though, I recommend the sets I talked about earlier, like sets that maximize your break effect or even the quantum set. Alright, now moving on for the stats you want on Boothill, it is very straightforward. As we saw earlier in the video, maximizing break effect and speed is basically all you need to do on this character. While crit is definitely useful, like it's not a useless stat, it'll increase the damage of your ult and your basics and it won't be a useless stat by any means. The increase in damage is not nearly as high as break effect or even speed if it allows you to hit certain speed breakpoints or get more turns in, meaning that unless you're investing an absurd amount into your Boothill, you can just focus on break effect and speed and be perfectly fine. Additional substats of crit is always nice, it's okay, but it should not be your #1 priority. I included a comparison earlier in the video that I could put on screen again now, sort of showing you that while yes, crit will increase your damage, even when you're comparing a crit main stat body to an HP one, it won't be that significant of an increase, and what matters more is your break effect and ensuring that you have good substats. Because of this, on all your pieces, you're looking for break effect and speed, and for your main stats, here's what you need to know. First of all, for your rope, you absolutely want break effect, and for your boots, you absolutely want speed. Now, for your other pieces, here is where it depends based on your substats. For example, for your orb, your planar sphere, the piece you're choosing will honestly just depend on however much break effect you can get on the substats and speed as well. For example, the difference between a physical orb and an attack one isn't much. They're both very strong, and you can choose whichever one you prefer. An attack orb gaining more value with damage buffers like Ron May, with physical damage being a bit more standard. But even then, what matters more here is not the main stat, but actually the substats and how much break effect and speed, as I mentioned multiple times already, you can get on your sphere. It actually matters so much that even using a defensive orb like HP percent or defense can be fine if you have more break effect on the substats, and the exact same thing applies to your body as well. For your body, you can either go for crit, generally crit rate if you want more of it, or can just choose HP percent or defense percent to be a bit tankier. Again though, you aren't choosing based on your main stat, generally speaking. Like yeah, crit will give you a bit more damage, but because most of your damage comes from break, focusing on your substats of break effect and speed will be more important. So going for a tank hill and going HP and defense is still fine, but going for crit and trying to get a bit more damage can also be fine. Both builds are strong. Obviously crit is a bit more damage at the cost of your tankiness, just choosing based on your substats to try to maximize your break damage. With that in mind, as far as how much speed you should be going on your Boothill, generally just the more the merrier, because going for other substats outside of just break effect isn't really that important. Speed is definitely going to be the most valuable one because it allows you to get more turns in, break more often, as well as allow you to hit certain thresholds that will increase your damage significantly, such as 145 speed for your Talia set, or other Memory of Chaos specific thresholds like 160 to go twice in the first 2 cycles. Because of this, I recommend going for one of these numbers, maybe 145 speed or 160 if you can, or even higher, as speed generally is just a good stat. With that in mind, you do also have to factor in the speed buffs you're gaining from, for example, your signature light cone that gives you 12%, Ron May who gives you 10% on her skill, or just other sources of speed you may have. With that in mind though, Boothill is a pretty fast character, especially because you're running speed boots, so hitting at least 145 speed for Talia shouldn't be too hard and is highly recommended, with 160 plus speed being what I recommend for more turns, alongside break effect, which you should be stacking as well. After that, your other stats like crit for damage or HP for survivability are a nice bonus, a luxury, but not as crucial as break effect and speed to maximize your break damage and your amount of turns. For a realistic idea of what you should be going for on Boothill, try to get as much break effect as possible. Aim for 300, but that's not always possible, so just however much break effect you can get will be good for your Boothill. 200 to 300 or more can be your goal, and many factors can make getting high break effect easier. For example, if you have a signature Lycone or a support that increases your break effect like Ron May or Harmony MC, both of which work really well with him, these are things that can help you get more break effect and make it easier to hit 300. If you don't quite have it though, it's fine, and even if you go past 300, break effect is still useful because most of your damage comes from breaking, as I mentioned earlier. And getting high speed like 145 or 160 should also be a goal of yours for the reasons I just mentioned. If you choose to run an action advancing support like Bronya, I would typically recommend running her on high speed as well, just one speed less than your Boothill to give them both a ton of actions. Alright, now moving on, let's talk about Boothill's best Lycones. Boothill's a very interesting case because there are two things that are true at the same time when it comes to his Lycones. First of all, his signature Lycone is very good and a significant upgrade from any other option. Secondly though, Boothill's a character who performs very well with basically any Lycone, even outside of his signature, because while his signature is the best by a pretty decent amount, virtually every other option doesn't do that much for him because of the stats he's looking for. Since he's not someone who scales well with crit or damage because of how important breaking is on this character, virtually every other Lycone doesn't really do that much for him. While there are some exceptions here, and there's even a good 3-star Lycone for Boothill, which we'll cover, he's in an interesting situation where he has a really accessible free-to-play Lycone option and performs really well with it. I'll do a showcase later in the video of my Boothill with a free-to-play Lycone, but he's also a character who has a really good signature that will make him feel stronger. This Lycone is the first one we're going to talk about, his signature Sailing Towards a Second Life. This Lycone will give him high base stats and a really good effect, granting him 60% break effect on top of having his break damage ignore 20% of the target's defense. This is absolutely huge and a massive DPS increase given how Boothill's damage is distributed. If that was enough, he also will gain 12% speed effectively for free, provided he has 150% break effect, which he will always have. Getting more break damage on top of ignoring defense and getting speed makes this Lycone a significant increase from his second best option. With that in mind, when we start looking at the other options, right? What else does he have? What other hunt Lycones can a break character use? We start noticing that almost every hunt Lycone just gives you stats like crit or damage percent, which are fine, but not as important as break effect. Because of this, a lot of these options rank similarly and are fine to use if you already have them leveled. An option that I personally really like though, and I think is going to be a great free-to-play choice, is the adversarial Lycone. While this is a 3-star with low base stats, which can make you a bit less tanky, more vulnerable, and have a bit less base attack, this won't matter as much as a standard DPS character who will scale on attack and crit a lot more importantly. Because you get so much damage from your break, these low base stats aren't as big of a deal, and its passive effect, giving you an 18% speed increase for 2 turns when you defeat an enemy, is actually a really big deal. While you might not be able to proc this effect against, for example, a single target, in most content in Star Rail, there tends to be a lot of enemies, and you usually can proc this effect relatively easily, allowing you to effectively get more speed for the rest of the fight, or at least for 2 turns if you can't chain kill enemies, and that's genuinely a lot of stats. For reference, the Messenger 2-piece only gives you 6% speed, and it's a good option on Boothill, whereas this Lycone will give you 18%, which honestly makes it good for a 3-star, despite its low base stats. And so in a lot of situations, if you can proc this effect, and keep in mind you can superimpose this for free just because it's a 3-star, it can be your second best in slot Lycone, even better than the other 5-star options. For your other options, a lot of them, as I said, will perform similarly. Going for a 5-star stat stick like Sleep Like the Dead, Cruising in the Stellar Sea, Baptism of Pure Thought, or In the Night are all perfectly viable, and the same can be said with 4-star stat sticks like Swordplay, Only Silence Remains, or Subscribe for More. You can use whichever one you have leveled or superimposed, as they can all be pretty decent. Also, I want to mention that similarly to Adversarial, another Lycone can give you speed, but basically only if you're running a shielder. This Lycone is River Flows in Spring, which will give you 8 to 12% speed depending on your superimposition level, as well as some damage bonus that will go away once you take damage. Because of this, while it isn't the most consistent Lycone, if you are running a strong shielder, notably someone like Aventurine or just another strong shielder, and can avoid taking damage on your Boothill, then this Lycone can be a good option that I wanted to mention. And for the most part, a lot of his Lycones perform similarly. I really like this 3-star Lycone option Adversarial, and his best in slot will undoubtedly be his signature Lycone that just gives you so many stats. I also want to reiterate here that even if you're going past 300 break effect, more break effect is always nice on top of the other things you're getting from a signature Lycone, so it's good even at that point, just in case you were wondering. Also, for the Lycone ranking calcs, take these with a grain of salt because as we saw, a lot of stats don't really matter for Boothill, and on some Lycones like Adversarial, you can't really quantify its effect because its effect's uptime will depend on what you're doing, and the value of speed also fluctuates and is hard to quantify. Regarding Boothill's Eidolons, how good are they? Well, first of all, Boothill's E1 will allow him to ignore 16% of the enemy target's defense, on top of giving him 1 stack of pocket trickshot when the battle starts. This is a decent DPS increase of around 10 or so percent, but it's not that significant, and it's not better than his signature Lycone if you're wondering whether you should go for S1 or E1, definitely S1 in his case. With that in mind, it's an okay E1, and moving on, his second Eidolon will give him skill points and break effect. In fact, when he's in standoff and gaining pocket trickshot, he will recover 1 skill point and increase his break effect by 30%, lasting for 2 turns. This effect can trigger also when he's at max stacks, but can be triggered multiple times in the same turn. Moving on, his E3 and E5 will increase his trace levels. E4 gives him a damage increase of 12% to the enemy in standoff, while also decreasing the damage that he takes from them by 12% as well. It's an okay Eidolon, but nothing amazing. Lastly, for his E6, this will increase his break damage of his talent's break damage to the target that he's breaking, on top of dealing bonus break damage to the adjacent targets, equal to 70% of the original damage multiplier. Overall, this is a pretty decent Eidolon. It's a big increase in damage, especially helping in AoE as well, although it doesn't seem to be that game-breaking when compared to certain other 6th Eidolons, at least as of right now. Overall, Boothill's Eidolons are okay, but they're honestly nothing amazing, so I don't think anyone should feel forced to get any, and they're not needed as he's a perfectly strong DPS even at E0. Alright, now moving on to one of the most important sections, let's talk about Boothill's best synergies and best team comps. First of all, it's important to say that Boothill is typically going to be played as a hyper carry alongside buffing and debuffing supports. Now, because Boothill isn't your typical carry and doesn't rely as much on attack buffs or crit buffs and relies on his break damage instead, this means that supports that can either help him break easier or increase his break damage, notably by either buffing Boothill or debuffing enemies, reducing their defense, applying vulnerability debuffs, anything like that to really make him a stronger break carry. Now, with that in mind, who are his best synergies? Well, there are a lot of options. First of all, Ron May and Bronya I think are 2 premier and really strong harmony options for Boothill. While Ron May is the most obvious one because she's a support who gives you a ton of buffs, notably increasing your break efficiency, on top of also giving you some damage bonus, increasing your speed, which is also very relevant, and also giving you res pen. She also delays the action of the enemy you break and also just gives you free break effect, so all the more reasons to play this character, on top of the weakness break efficiency, the speed, and the res pen. With that in mind though, despite Ron May being an obvious choice and part of Boothill's best team, personally I think Bronya is honestly slept on as far as her synergy goes with Boothill. I've seen a lot of discourse of Ron May being the best support for him by far, and while I think Ron May is amazing and you should definitely use her, I think Bronya is up there as potentially even just the best option for him because of her incredible action advance. Now, while Bronya gives a lot of buffs to your entire team, notably damage bonus, crit damage, and attack percent, which are all useful but not the most needed on Boothill, she will also give you an instant action advance that also has a cleanse attached to it. Now, this action advance is especially nice because not just does any DPS want to go as often as possible, and Bronya will effectively give you another turn, but since Boothill in particular relies on breaking enemies, going more often means attacking more, therefore breaking easier. It's basically a form of weakness break efficiency if instead of just buffing how much toughness damage you do, you just go more often. It also will translate to way more damage because you can use your skill more, use your ult more, and just do way more overall. While these are still some really preliminary, early team calculations that depend on a million things, so don't take them as gospel, as far as DPS or damage per action value goes, teams with Bronya tend to be the best from the math that has been done so far. With Bronya, I would recommend running her fast, just 1 speed under your Boothill, whatever threshold you're going for, allowing both your Boothill and your Bronya to get 2 turns in the first 2 cycles of Memory of Chaos, effectively allowing your Boothill to go 4 times, generally just keeping your Bronya fast, but right behind your Boothill. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because not only is Bronya a standard character that a lot of people have, and that I think you should use with your Boothill if you have her, but also because I feel like she isn't as hyped up as much with Boothill as someone like Ron May, who obviously is a great option, synergizes very well with a break character like Boothill, but I want you to know that even if you don't have her, you can make a good team with Boothill, and the same applies with Bronya. These are 2 really strong harmony options that are both amazing with Boothill. You can run both with him or just one, but even without one or both of them, you can still make a lot of free-to-play friendly teams. This is because Boothill also has other strong support options that I'm about to talk about. First First of all, the new Harmony MC can be a great free-to-play option as a support who will allow you to super break and have a lot of good synergies with your kit, notably helping you break enemies faster, increasing your break effect, and also getting better with their E6, which isn't available in-game at the time I'm recording this, but we should be getting it soon. Even without it though, you increase break effect and help your team break more efficiently, so definitely a good support for Boothill. I do also want to add that regarding Harmony MC or Imaginary MC, they do get better against multiple enemies thanks to one of their traces, and enables you to super break, which I think is really good, but because Boothill already has a ton of break damage that he can trigger by himself, Harmony MC, while they still have good synergy with Boothill, is not a must, but just a good free-to-play option, and I just wanted to make that distinction. Oh, and another thing I want to add, Xylox from the future here, I do think Harmony MC is especially good in content that's a bit difficult for Boothill, for example, against a lot of enemies, notably imaginary weak enemies, on top of also giving you like a really big super break number that can be more satisfying. And while typically getting a lot of turns with someone like Bronya is really good, Harmony MC giving you super break and helping you in those situations, notably against a lot of imaginary weak enemies, on top of being a free-to-play option, definitely makes them a solid choice that you shouldn't be neglecting and that I do quite like. With Harmony MC, Ron May is an incredible support though, just because of the weakness break efficiency and all the other buffs you're getting, synergizing particularly well with them. Other really good characters with Boothill can be some of the Nihility options, namely Pila, a accessible 4-star support who has insane amounts of def shred. I am the #1 Pila salesman. I think she's amazing, super broken, and she can be incredibly skill point efficient. All you need to do on her is use your ultimate and you'll apply a huge defense shred debuff to all the enemies you're fighting. She therefore works very well with Boothill in order to just shred the defense of enemies and also be skill point efficient, because something you'll notice is that Boothill obviously wants to use his skill, and Bronya, if you are playing her, also will spam her skill, so you want to make sure that wherever you can get it, you also have 1 or 2 skill point efficient characters to help balance out your team. As far as other Nihility characters go, Silverwolf can be great in single target, implanting another weakness, potentially Quantum, which synergizes with the Quantum set. She can help you break enemies, apply bugs, reduce the resistance of enemies on top of their defense with her ult, and be a very strong support overall as well. Weld can be viable for his vulnerability debuff and slowing enemies, also pretty good at breaking, but as far as Nihilities go, I think Silverwolf and Pila are the more premier debuffers, giving you a huge amount of damage, and so the two that I would recommend. Overall, those are the buffers I really like for Boothill, and you can kind of mix and match a team accordingly. Regarding some other options that I didn't mention, Sparkle can be viable, but first of all, the buffs she gives don't really synergize well with Boothill because they won't really increase his break damage at all. He can't really make use of the crit, but her action advance can be really nice. And as far as her action advance goes, it is nice, but typically Sparkle synergizes the most with DPS characters running on low speed, and your Sparkle will be really fast, bringing them up to her speed and allowing your DPS character to go for attack boots and stack damage without having to think about their speed. With that in mind, Boothill is a character who really doesn't lose much by building speed. You want to proc the Talia set anyways, and attack and crit don't do that much for him as we saw earlier, so there's no real downside to building speed anyways. And so because of this, Sparkle isn't as recommended as some supports like Bronya that I mentioned previously. With that in mind, I personally do believe that you can play Sparkle with Boothill, but I would recommend still running a fast Boothill and a fast Sparkle, just running your Sparkle sort of like how you would run a Bronya, acting right after your Boothill and then bringing him back up on 1 less speed than him, keeping both of them fast. The only problem with this is that because Sparkle's action advance isn't 100%, it's only 50, there can be some issues, and you also don't make use of her other really important buffs, so I usually recommend running Sparkle on your other team instead of with Boothill, but I wanted to mention that it can be a option. I just obviously will recommend Bronya over her as a much better choice. Regarding the other buffers I didn't mention, again, they can have some nice things like an action advance, but a lot of their attack and crit just isn't as important on Boothill, so I wouldn't recommend them. If you want to do some fun things, you can play someone like Luca, but obviously not like the premier choice. For your last thought, you want a sustain character, and as far as your sustain options go, there are a few options, typically the standard ones, but also Gallagher being a surprisingly strong 4-star. Gallagher can be a nice support because his talent makes enemies receive more break damage, and so he can provide your Boothill with a bit more damage. He's also a decent healer, can be skill point efficient, but doesn't heal the most compared to some 5-stars, although it is usually enough, and he does get better with Eidolons, notably his E2, which gives him a cleanse. For other support options, I think any of these strong skill point efficient healers, like Ho-Ho for some energy, Aventurine for a shield, Fushuen for some tankiness, or Luocha for an incredible amount of healing, or Japard as another shield option, all work well with Boothill as good skill point efficient sustain options. Because of this, the sky's the limit with Boothill, and let me give you some example teams. I think a premier choice would be running Bronya and Ron May with a healer like Gallagher, but even if you don't have one of the 5-stars, using a support like Pila instead of Ron May can work very well. You can also use Harmony MC. A great free-to-play choice for a team would be running the Harmony Trailblazer, Pila, and Gallagher as a team comprised of 2 4-stars, Boothill, and your free Trailblazer. Mix and match into the Harmony harmony and nihility characters that I mentioned, with an abundance or preservation character to make sure you don't die, and I think you have a great team. Also, for high investment players, you can get some crazy clears with sustainless teams of just really strong buffing characters with your Boothill, going over and over and killing enemies before they can hit you, but obviously I wouldn't recommend this for normal gameplay. I do want to lastly take the time to point out that while Boothill has a strong premium team, he also has a really accessible free-to-play one with 4-star supports that synergize well with him so that everyone can make a solid Boothill team regardless of if you're a whale, low spender, or free-to-play. And so yeah, overall Boothill is a character that I really enjoy personally. I think his playstyle is fun, he has unique gameplay, a lot of accessible teams and builds, and I like the fact that you can just kind of stack substats on him, like stack break effect, stack speed, and not worry about the rest. It makes for some really interesting and cool clears, especially like I've done and seen some without a light cone or using a light cone of a different path or kind of random sets, all that stuff. Obviously you can optimize him, obviously there's big upgrades for him, but the fact that he doesn't really need anything to perform at least pretty well, on top of being a very unique character that also has his weaknesses, of course, make him very unique and special to me, a character that I do definitely like. As always, if there's anything you want to add, it will be in a pinned comment, and while this guide is still pretty early, I wish I could have gotten it out earlier, so I'll try to do my best, and apologies for the different mic quality throughout the video. Thanks so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.